this section we are going to discuss about the growth rates. So the two types of growth rates are arithmetic growth rate and geometric growth rate. So arithmetic and geometric. So arithmetic growth rate and geometric growth rate. These are the two types of growth rate which are present in plants. So first let's start with arithmetic growth rate. Now here what happens is, if there is a cell, like this. So we have a cell and this cell has undergone mitotic division. What happens is, two cells are formed. Two cells will be formed. Here, this one of the cell gets differentiated. So this cell got differentiated or specialized. And then if this cell gets differentiated or specialized, then it lost the ability, or it lost its ability to divide. So this cell is no more going to divide. Only this cell is going to divide. If this cell divides, what happens? Again, two cells are formed. So here, this cell is this one, and this cell has given rise to two other cells. In these two cells, one more cell is going to differentiate in this way. Now what happens? This cell, so these two cells has lost the ability to divide. So this one is going to divide now. It gives rise to two more daughter cells. Here what happens? This cell has already got differentiated. This cell also already got differentiated. And this cell has given rise to two daughter cells. Here also one of the cell gets differentiated. And this process continues. It goes on like forever. So this is what happens in mitotic division. And this is what happens in the arithmetic growth rate condition. Here, if a cell divides into two daughter cells by mitotic division, one of the cell gets specialized, and then the other remaining cell divides into two cells, and then one of the cell in those two daughter cells also gets specialized, and so on. So these shaded parts are all the differentiated cells. This is what happens in arithmetic growth rate. Now let's take a look at the geometric growth rate. In geometric growth rate, we have a cell again. Here what happens? This cell divides into two daughter cells. So this particular cell divides into two daughter cells. And here, like in arithmetic growth rate, one of the cell is getting specialized. Here, no cell gets specialized. So everything has the ability to divide. So this cell is going to divide into two daughter cells. And this cell is also going to divide into two daughter cells. In this manner. So this cell gave rise to two daughter cells. This cell also gave rise to two of these daughter cells. Now what happens? Each cell again divides. Now what happens is, there are four cells. This cell is 2. This cell also gives rise to 2 daughter cells. This one also 2 daughter cells, and like this. So this cell is these 2 daughter cells, this cell, these 2 daughter cells, this cell, these 2 daughter cells, and this cell, these 2 daughter cells. So like that, the division continues forever. The only difference between this one is and this one is in arithmetic growth rate. Here, one of the cell is getting differentiated. Here, there is no cell which is getting differentiated. Everything has the capability to divide. So this is about the arithmetic growth rate and geometric growth rate. So in geometric growth rate, if we started off with one cell, it became 2 cells, and then 4 cells, and then it goes on forever. 8, 16, 32, 64. So it divides like that forever. That means there are many cells which are being formed. In this case here, always one of the cell is getting differentiated and only one remaining cell is dividing for 2 daughter cells. So this is about the arithmetic and the geometric growth rate. Now let's look at the graphs which are used to represent these growth rates and some of the formulas. So now let's look at the graph. For arithmetic growth rate, the graph somewhat looks like this. In this manner. So the graph looks like this. So it is linear. So we can take note of this one. It's a linear graph. And now let's look at the formula. Now we have to label x and y axis. The x axis shows the time and the y axis shows the length or the height of a plant. So let's look at the formula. The formula for this arithmetic growth rate is LT is equal to L0 plus RT. So this is the formula that we use to represent the arithmetic growth rate. Let's look at what each one represents. LT is the length at time t, length at time t, and L0, this particular part, is length or the height of a plant, length of a plant at time 0. Time 0 means the initial time. So initial length we can tell, because at the initial time, that is time 0, what is the length? So that's the L0. That's the starting point. LT is the length at time t, which we are actually discussing. Length 0 is the length at time 0, and R, this particular R, is the rate of growth or growth rate, and we know that T is the time of growth. So growth rate. So these are the 3 things that we need to remember, and we need to understand the formula, what each one represents, and the type of graph. The graph in case of arithmetic growth rate is a linear graph. Linear means it's a straight like this. So this particular equation, it represents the straight line equation. So the straight line equation is y is equal to mx plus c. That means the y is equal to mx plus c. That means m is r is the growth rate. So the graph that we're actually representing, or the line that we're actually drawing, represents the growth rate. So this is the arithmetic growth rate, and t is the time, and L0 is this one, this part. So again, if we write, it's in the form of y is equal to mx plus c. Y is LT, c is L0, m is r, x is t. So this way we can relate this kind of equation to the line equation. So that's why here linear graph is there. So if you understand it carefully, m is the slope, which is r. So the line that we are actually drawing represents this growth rate, the slope, and t is x, y is lt, and c is L0. C is the point where the line cuts the y-axis. So here the y-axis, it cuts at L0. So this particular length, this one. So this particular length that we are talking about, this length represents the length of the plant at time 0. So length of the plant at time 0, that is L0. So this, I hope you understood about the linear graph. What it relates to? It relates to the general line equation that we use. Next, let's talk about the geometric growth rate. Here also we will learn about the graph and the formula as well. So if we draw it, again it's important to label the x-axis and y-axis. So this is time and this is length in case of arithmetic growth rate. In geometric growth rate, here this is time, this is the weight. So here it's a bit different, and the way the graph looks like is not linear. Linear is in case of arithmetic growth rate. Here it somewhat looks like this. It looks like a curve in this manner. So it somewhat looks like an S shape. That's why it's known as sigmoidal growth curve. So sigmoid or sigmoidal growth curve or graph. So this is what we call as sigmoid growth curve or S-shaped growth curve. So this is about the shape of the graph. Now there are some certain names which are given to the graph. We can label it as well. This particular part, this length, is known as lag phase. Lag phase. Lag phase is the slowest phase. This part of the graph where the growth rate is very high, so it's moving up. This part is known as log phase or the exponential phase. Exponential or log phase. And this part is the stationary phase. Stationary phase. So this phase is more or less like steady. So it doesn't grow too much. It's like this. So this is the shape of the graph of how this looks like in geometric growth rate. Here we have the lag phase, log phase or exponential phase, and the stationary phase. It looks like an S shape, like a sigmoidal shape. So that's why it's known as sigmoid graph. Now let's look at the formula that we use it. The formula is W1 is equal to W0 plus ERT. So this is the formula, W0 ERT. So this is the formula that we use for the sigmoidal graph. W1 is called W0 ERT. Now let's label it. RT is the power. Okay. Let's label now. What is W1? W1 is the final size or the size at time t. So final size. Now this W1, it can also be written as WT because normally they can represent it as W1 or WT because the final size is actually the size which we are talking about. So for example, here we put the time as 1 year. Then we can put the time as the 1 year. So we are talking about the final size that the plant has reached in 1 year. So that is what we call as final size. We should not think that a plant has, and we told that plant growth is indeterminate, that means it can grow continuously throughout their life. So that's why we should not think it like that. Here we're talking about a specific period of time. If you take time as 1 year, we have to think that W1 is the size of the plant after 1 year. That means size or weight of the plant after 1 year. This is just an example that we are using to understand. So this W1 is the final size. W0 is the initial size. So it's a size at time time 0. That means initial size. So when it is starting, when the plant is starting its rate of growth, what is the weight of it? It's the weight at time 0, initial size. E is the base of natural logarithms, or log, base of natural logarithms. T is the time of growth, and R, this particular R, is the growth rate or rate of growth. Here also the curve, the shape of the curve itself represents the growth rate. So this is the formula that we use for the geometric growth rate. The formula is W1 is equal to W0 ERT. Here LT is equal to L0 plus RT. So these are different formulas that we use for linear graphs and the sigmoid graphs. So arithmetic growth rate and geometric growth rate. So in maths as well, when we learn about the different sequences or the progressions, so arithmetic progression, geometric progression, there also the formulas somewhat look like this only. So here in arithmetic growth rate, it's linear, and this particular length represents L0, which is length at time 0. And geometric growth rate, this is sigmoid graph. It's a curve actually, and we label these graph as well: lag phase, log or exponential phase, and the stationary phase. Here it's stationary, that means it's still, and the formula is W1 is equal to W0 ERT. W1 is final size. Final size means the size at time t. So we can also write it like that: size at time t. Time t is the time which we are talking about. So if the time is 1 year, we can tell that it's a size after 1 year. If the size is 1 month, we can tell it as size after 1 month. So somewhat like that. And what is this size? This size is the weight. So that's why we have written weight here. And W0 ERT. E is the base of natural logarithms. T is the time of growth. R is the growth rate. So this is about the two growth rates. We have learned about the arithmetic and the geometric growth rate, and we learned about how the cell divides. So in arithmetic growth rate, at least one cell in the two daughter cells is getting specialized. But in case of geometric growth rate, there is no cell which is getting specialized, and all of them has the ability to divide. So for example, if we started off with one cell, it divides into two cells. So in geometric growth rate, we started off with one cell, it divides into two cells, and then 4 cells, and then 88, 16, 32, 64, some like that. So it continuously divides forever. And also we looked at the graphs. These are the most important parts: the linear graph and the sigmoid graph or S-shaped graph, the different equations and what they are called. So here it's the line equation. If you observe it carefully, it kind of looks like a line equation. And that is one more formula that we have for geometric growth rate. So in this video we discussed about arithmetic growth rate and the geometric growth rate.